So if you look at your roll-up strategy, you're going to be between 5, 7, maybe 9 or 10 years before you've started, built it, streamlined it, positioned it, sold it, and cashed out of it. We can do it in 2. Well, in fact, we can get the value doubled in 6 months, but you've got to position it and sell it. So we can be in and out within a year, but there's another piece. One of the other big challenges that a business owner has, or a family business has, is that they've all accepted, because it's always the way that it's been done, that they're going to come to a point in time when they sell this thing, and they're going to leak 30 to 50% in fees and taxes and this, that, and the other. Well, we can normally bring that down to less than 10. If you're worth 5 million and you do nothing, you end up keeping between 3 and 3.5, depending on where you are in the world, or depending on where you pay your tax. Working with us, we're going to take it from 5 to put it to 10. And then of the 10, we're going to aim to get that cost base of selling it down to less than 10%, which means you've got roughly 8.5, 9, maybe a little bit more going to your bank. That's 3x what you would have had a year earlier, because we can do both. Go back a couple of years, I was in private equity, being the selfish bastard that bought low, built over a period of time, and sold high. But when I had cancer, it was at the time when the pandemic was kicking around. And I don't want to take you back to this because it's not very pleasant, but when we were in 2020, 21, we were at the point where we'd been locked down for a year. We were going out in little groups. If we didn't, groups of 4, right? And then I went out and just got a medical check because I'm on private medical. I thought it's time I did this, and to be told that I got stage 4 and I had 6 months to live. So in the UK you could do private treatment for this, because they didn't have to take COVID patients in private hospitals. So they took out the cancer, and we sat around for a while thinking about what was going to happen next. And then I got the original strain of COVID, which cured me of the cancer, as it happens. Okay. And so while I'm going through that first round of COVID was when the vaccines weren't in, and it was okay for you and I, us youngsters, because we had 28 days to get better, but the old people didn't know whether they were going to make it. They were going to go left or right. Okay, and so I came through it, but I all of a sudden went from 6 months to live to maybe 28 days, because none of us knew pre-vaccine what was going to happen. We just knew that you were going to go through a 12 to 28 day cycle before you figured out whether you were here or not. So I'm in that. And so when I come out, you feel robbed of 6 months, and then you start realizing, did I do enough to take care of my family? Because you think you're bulletproof when you're making great money, and you think you're going to live forever, and all of a sudden you could have just anywhere between 12 and 28 days. And I thought, shit, I'm in trouble. And I'm trying to fill the heads of my kids with everything entrepreneurial as much as I could. And I was on one of these calls with a business that we were trying to buy in California, where the gap was just too big. We couldn't reach terms to buy a business that were long enough that would be supported by the assets and the cash flow of the business to be able to buy it. So of course I'm going through this call. My 10-year-old's at the door because he'd come and check on Dad. You know what they're like at that age? They're lovers. Right? In another 6 years they won't want to talk to us, but at that age he's checking on me at 7, 11, at lunch.
Don't tell me yet. I'm still behind you.
You got another 6 years before you got that trouble.
Yeah.
But and not all of them. You might be very lucky. And so, yeah. And when I got to that, my son's standing at the door as I'm coming off a call. We were talking about these 9 out of 10. All he wanted to know was what happens to the 9 companies that don't sell. And my answer was, well, this gap's too big. It's very difficult. He said, no, Dad. He said, what happens to their parents? Because remember, what we were seeing on the news every single day was league tables. How many deaths there were in every country around the world. How many new infections were there in every country around the world. That's all we saw. And that's all he saw because he was in lockdown. So he wanted to know what happens to the mums and dads of all those parents, so to the parents of all those kids, if their mums and dads get COVID and they die, who's going to look after them? Because he's 10, right? And so I didn't have an answer, but it started some thinking. Those aren't the words of a 10-year-old. Those are the words of his dad. But these, it took some time for me to figure it out. But it led to me starting to pivot towards this direction that I'm in now. And the first thing I did, which took me 2 years, was write a book. And the book is called The Secrets to 10xing Your Business and Cashing Out Tax-Free. Made it all the way to Times Square to become, featured on the NASDAQ and all the rest of that stuff. And so I thought, obviously I've hit a nerve with somebody here. And then somebody from a podcast said, come and have a chat. That led to quite a few. Now I've got somebody dedicated to getting me on podcasts just to share this, because it's a message that impacts all companies all over the world. And you can do, depending on which country you're in and where you pay your tax, you can do more in some places than you can in others, but everybody can do something. So we started looking at that just as a promise to a 10-year-old. And now it's become a thing where there are 25 people in the business, all of us geared towards trying to improve the value of a business without an owner having to dilute, without an owner have to debt service, in preparation for it to be sold, so that we can get a lot more money for it and they can get double what they would have gotten. But it's actually more than that, because we measure it by what goes in the bank, not by what you sell it for, because you're still going to get some fees. So it's how much can you keep, right? So we have to value the business, and I just use sensible metrics. If you're less than $1 million in EBITDA, then I'm going to value at 1 times EBITDA. There will be some reasons why in some cases it's 2, but it bloody isn't 10, right? And if you go through to 10 million of EBITDA, you're going to be somewhere between 5 and 8 times in most instances. Now, sometimes it's more or less, but that's where we'll, as a starting point, it's where are we? Where do we need to get it to? And can I get it there? Because I can't make it work in all industries, right? So what you find is it does change a little bit from one industry sector to the next. There's definitely that impact. But a business that's making 750,000 in profit isn't going normally to be worth 10 million, unless there's something on the balance sheet, like a great big property, which is outside of what the business needs, that boosts that valuation up. So not taking those things into account, normally based on a multiple of EBITDA, I'll look at it and say 1 times, 1 and a bit times below $1 million, and then increasing that multiple the closer you get to 10 million. And at 10 million, in most industries, you're going to be somewhere between 5 and 8 times. You can be more, but you're going to be 5 and 8 times. So where it's really important that we help owners, because the biggest challenge they've got is most business owners won't be able to pull companies together because they haven't got the capital resources to acquire them. And if they can do that, to think about this as a roll-up strategy, something that you mentioned earlier, they're on a 9 or 10-year journey to, if you think about this, you buy the first one and you debt service that, you borrow money to do that one. And so therefore you're paying for that business out of your future profit, and it will take you 4 to 5 years to pay down that loan. Now you've got 2 combined unencumbered debt-free entities, and then you can accelerate in pace. So if you're at year 5 when you've paid off the first one, you're then going to accelerate over the next 5 years to get more businesses bought from the profits that you've now got, because you're looking to get your business to a point where it's worth 75 million, 100 million, something like that. And people go, that's ridiculous, but it really isn't. If you've got the capital to bring the companies together, you can achieve these valuations. So the trick is, how do you do that in less than 10 years? Or if you don't like that, how do you do it in less than 7? Because we do it in 18 months.
Do you get a lot of pushback from clients on the valuation methodology? Maybe they say we have, I don't know what technology, we have SEO legacy that's built up, whatever, IPs, all kinds of reasoning for a high valuation.
Yeah, not interested. And so I'm always going to sit and have that conversation with a client and see where makes sense, or what makes sense. But we're looking to double the value of the business. And so if we can't agree on that, then we won't engage. And what makes us different, what makes what I'm doing different is I'm bringing the capital to help grow the business in preparation for it to be sold. Nobody does this. Anybody that brings capital is going to take equity from the business, which means they might argue that it's not worth 5 million. They might say it's worth 8 million. But to bring that capital in, they're going to dilute their position from that 8 down to 4. Assuming that it's a 50% dilution. It's not always the case, but just for an example. Well, I'm not taking any equity for bringing the capital. So oftentimes I can argue they're going to be worth more working with me because they're not taking any dilution, and I'm going to double them from where they are.
So are they taking this in the form of debt, or how do you provide this growth capital?
We use it to build a bigger group, and we control the capital, so they don't take it into the business as debt, and they don't equity dilute, so they don't get access to the capital. We build a bigger group with the capital of maybe 4 or 5 companies, but we do it specifically because we've got an exit in mind from day one. We start with the end in mind. There's a chap who's not alive anymore called Stephen Covey who wrote the 7 habits of highly effective people. Habit number 1 or 2 is start with the end in mind. So if you're going to do this yourself with your own capital, you'll see your 7, 8, 9 years is what private equity does. But if we're doing it, we're going to get it done in somewhere between 6 and 18 months. And the way that we do that is to know where we're going to where the buyers are. We've already got the capital support, the aligned capital specifically for this thesis. We'll build a bigger group, and that bigger group has a much higher profit. And that much higher profit means that when the group is sold, the owners get a bigger return on that, a much bigger return, even after our fees, because we align most of our success towards most of our fee towards the successful outcome, which means this: if we don't achieve that sale, we don't get paid. We do get a monthly fee. We got bills to pay too. So we've got to cover our bills along the way, but we align ourselves to the success of the people that we're working with. And so if that doesn't happen, we don't get paid. Now, if they decide they don't want to do this, and this happens now and again, and sometimes the most common reason why somebody who we've got a buyer for doesn't sell is because they just get frightened of what they're going to do tomorrow now that they've sold their business.
So there's no commitment up front for you to start the whole process of combining all these companies from a certain sector, industry, whatever.
There is a commitment because they're paying a monthly fee.
Yeah, okay. But now, outside of that, there is no commitment that they would sell.
Well, there is a commitment because the monthly fee, without going into the details because that's proprietary, but the monthly fee is an amount of money, which means that if they decide they're not going to sell, they still owe us. So we will have a monthly fee where we will defer an amount of that money to the completion. And if they decide they're not going to sell, the deferred fee is paid to us. And therefore that stops them entering into oh yeah, well, if we get there and we like it, we maybe do it if it's because what happens a lot is people do like it, but they get scared about life after they've dreamt about selling the business, and they get to the point where, okay, it's happening, we're in due diligence, and they just get scared because they don't know what they're going to do tomorrow. And so that doesn't mean the deal doesn't happen. It does mean it gets delayed 6 months. But my investors won't like that. They want to help them get a lot more money, but they're making money too. And so in the way that we structure it, so we take a lot of risk, we bring the capital, we don't dilute them, we don't debt service them, but we expect to complete on the transaction. And if they don't complete on the transaction, the success fee we would have got doesn't get paid, but our deferred fees do get paid. Way too much information, I'm sure, for anybody to be interested in.
I'm sure if anyone's interested in selling, they would be asking for this kind of information. So thank you.
Oh no, they would. Yeah, definitely. But the principle of it, it just starts from a very humble beginning. I'm not some kind of guru or expert. I'm just a guy that was trying to solve a problem because I made a promise to my 10-year-old son, and he wanted to know. Back in the days of COVID and the pandemic, if a lot of smaller businesses don't actually get sold because they can't get the price that they need, everybody blames the broker.
Yeah.
But it's not really the broker's fault. It's very much like selling a property. If you've got a property and it's too expensive for the market, it sits there for a year or 2 years. But if you've priced it too aggressively, you've sold it in 1 or 2 hours. Typically, you're going to be there for 3 months before you've sold it and you go into contracts. That's about the right kind of price for the market dynamics at that time. There's a lot of other factors as well, but roughly speaking, a business is really similar in many, many ways. But what we're trying to do is force value into the business to get a lot more for it. So that's really, what are we doing to improve the property? Well, with a property, you might put another level on the, put another story on top of it to turn it from a single story to a double story, or you might redecorate, or you might extend it, make it bigger. With the business, I do the same things by making the profit bigger, by bringing other businesses around it. But we control the cash to build those businesses around it and seek the buyers. We're not brokers, we're not bankers, so we're advisors. So when you're selling an asset, if it's an asset sale, we can do a lot of flexibility. But if it's a share sale, if it's selling the whole business, which a lot of the higher value businesses will be, a lot of the bigger businesses will be, then we roll under the bank when it gets sold. So that it's not then the owner that pays us. It's the owner that pays us, but via the bank, because the bank will also be wanting to charge you too much money for completing on the transaction. But we work with owners as well to say, okay, now if we could double the value of your business, let's imagine that you were worth 5 million, you did nothing, and you're going to lose between 30 and 50% of taxes and fees. Well, of that 5 million, you end up with between 2.5 and 4, or 2.5 and 3.7. That's a big chunk of your life's work going everywhere else except in your bank. That's not very fair. Well, if we could double it to 10 and bring all those fees down to maybe less than 10%, and that's reducing the tax, reducing the broker fees, reducing the legal fees, reducing the accounting fees, and everyone else. There's two ways in which we help with that. One, there's some structuring that we can help get done. Two, with the help of AI, there's an awful lot more that you can be aware of and get done. Not going to be careful here. One of my clients is coming into 200 million. Oh my God, that's such a lot of money. Now, this is not a business sale, but it's the same principle. And they've spent 150,000 and 11 months getting advice on how to organize their affairs so that when they receive that money, they pay the least amount of tax on that. On that 200 million, they're going to lose 80 if they do nothing. Unfortunately, the advisors that they spent 150,000 with passed away. So they came to me and said, could I help? So we ran it through the tools that we built to see what we could do to help them with opportunities to structure differently. The net is that tax liability on 200 million will come down to less than 6, completely legally. And we can do that with the tools that we've developed in conjunction with AI. Now, we can't implement it because to actually implement that, you're going to need an accountant, you're going to need a lawyer. But what that means is they can now have the conversation with an advisor and on the front foot say, this is what we are looking to do and these are the reasons why. And the advisor can't then take 11 months to do what we did in 11 minutes to hang out their fees. I'm guessing that that's what they did because it didn't make any sense to me. That's not what was told to me before anybody throws a lawsuit at me. So with the help of AI, we can do an awful lot to massage down an owner's cost when they're going through the process of growing and exiting. We can get the right people involved to administer that, execute on that. Because when you're going to change a structure of a business, you've got to have a lawyer or an accountant on board to do the right things because they're the professional people. But so many of those guys haven't yet embraced AI. So we can help with that. We can do that in any country in the world, by the way. Germany, Austria, United States, UK, anywhere.
So you're speaking about quite a difference between the level of these clients. So one is making the one you're just mentioning, 200 million, and then there's a smaller chunk businesses that make 1 million of EBITDA approximately. What is your typical type of business, size, industry? What kind of businesses do you take on?
There isn't. So you would like to think that, well, it is the case. It is the case that large corporations have got all the resources available to them to do the due diligence, to do all the research, to make acquisitions and disposals. We don't target those companies. We started off targeting the 9 out of 10 that needed our help. And that phrase was the phrase that my 10-year-old son coined. This started as a personal mission to help smaller companies with at least 500,000 in profit get more and keep more. How it's now developed is I wrote the book, The Secrets to 10xing Your Business and Cashing Out Tax-Free, which if anybody wants, they can either get it from Amazon or they can download a PDF copy from my website for free.
And
the
your
reason
website, we didn't state your website, I believe, acquisitions4.you.com.
Yeah, and so they can download a PDF version. Now, why would they do that? They might do that because actually Amazon, I'm a self-published author, by the way. I didn't know how to do any of this. I just made a promise and then I got on and started dealing with it. And so they published the book and sent it out to people in the UK, in Australia, and in the United States, and I think some of the European countries, but not all of them. So I thought, well, that's not fair. I'll make a PDF copy available. And so people can download it for free. But it's not an expensive book. It's like $9 or $10. So, it's not hugely expensive or something like that. We don't make money off the book. The book is there to help everybody that doesn't make 500,000 in profit adopt 2, 3, 4 things out of the 12 chapters of the book that might get them to that threshold. And then on the website, we've added a bunch of other things. Like if you want to get an AI-driven marketing plan to help you drive more revenue, then you can go into the website and answer 9 questions in about 4 minutes, and it will start generating these for you. Now, it will generate everything. Don't take everything. Just if you want a LinkedIn thing, go and do that. And if you want it in German, you can have it in German. And if you want it in English, and you can have it in English. I don't think we do Swahili, but we've made it as easy for people to self-help as we can when they're too small for us to work with right now. We want them to get this so we can. Now, the ones that are too big, so one of my clients does 200 million in revenue, but they only make 6 million in profit.
Okay.
And so I love the way that you did that. Because now, if they were thinking, and they are thinking about selling, that 200 million revenue line puts people off and they go, oh my God, this is too big. We can't deal with this. But the reality is the value of that business is measured on the profitability, the profit that it makes. And on a 3% margin, that's not attractive for any buyer. So what are they going to do? They're going to stay in it, or working with us, we've now built 4 other companies around them, so that we're not looking at 6 million on one, but with 4 others, each doing 6 million. They're not. They're doing an order of magnitude similar, 2.5%, 3.5%. Now we've gone from 6 million to 18, 20 million in profit, and built in distribution by accident because of the way what these companies are, which makes it appealing to a buyer at the top level, because it adds in now not 200 million of top line, it adds in nearly 1 billion of top line to an organization that's big enough to see the value of distribution in that particular industry with other products and services that potential buyer can deliver. And so why do I share this with you? It's because what I find is a common thread across many companies is they're brilliant at the thing that they do. But to think left and right of who might want and how it comes together is not what they set up a business to do. And if you think about that, then you're going to take your eye off the ball of the business you're running, which is then when you're going to see it start to potentially decline, unless it's fully systemized, which, let's face it, not many of them are. And so, from that perspective, you've got to create the opportunity and the value that someone else is willing to pay for. And we add an awful lot of value there. And we can use the capital to build that group. Now, at that level, our capital wouldn't be needed, because what we're focusing on is who would want and be open to buying this group of companies. And at that level, they've got enough cash. So our biggest client is an IT firm. They have 6.5 billion with a B to buy businesses. every year. And let me just say that number again. It's so ridiculous. I can't even get it in my own head. 6.5 billion a year to make acquisitions. Their biggest challenge is finding the companies to buy. And what they love about what we do is we're very good at finding companies to buy. But why would somebody want to sell? Only if you can add value to them that they're not going to get on their own. Which brings me right back to, if I can get the right 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, or 10 of them together, then I can create that value for the owners to see that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity because they can only do it as a group. We hold the group together, and the buyers like it because they will argue, can we buy them individually? And no, they can't. And so they're comfortable with that. But they can't do that because even with 6.5 billion to spend on buying companies, they don't have 1,000 people to go and find them. They've got very small M&A departments. So there's niche value in this that I never expected to see, never understood. But we focus on adding value to the company owners that are going to be bought. And that's not just financially. I haven't mentioned legacy, looking after the business, valuing the people, making sure that all of that stuff is in play, because owners won't sell a business to anybody. They want to sell it to the right people that are going to look after it. And private equity is often tarnished. Corporate buyers, less so. Family offices, less so. There's a big shift in the market happening now too, with family offices coming in much more directly. And less in favor of private equity. They're still huge. They're not going anywhere, but it's just a dynamic shift in the marketplace as to what's happening. And it just started from the humble beginning of, how do I fulfill a promise to a 10-year-old? I thought writing a book would be enough, but it turns out that when you write a book, 80% of people that get it never open the cover. So I thought, well, I'll have to do something else. And somebody invited me on a podcast, and I started chatting about it. And so that's helped a little bit. And then I started talking on stage. And when I was on stage once, and it was somebody came to me afterwards and said, I really want to help you, because this change came out of a really difficult personal situation when I had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer in 2020 in the heat of the pandemic. And I only had 6 months to live. And so going through that, the choice that was made was, we're going to take the cancer out. And that might give you a few more months. We have no idea. So at that point, if you're faced in that situation, which I hope none of your listeners ever are, you'll do anything for one more day, because that's, one more day with your family that you wouldn't have had. But while I'm going through that, I got COVID, the original strain, no vaccines, which kind of knocks the stuffing out of you this is January 2021. So it was about April, May that the vaccine started to come in for people like me. Key workers were getting them, of course. But for people like me, it was about sort of March, April that it started to come in. But when I got the COVID, when I went back to see my consultant, he said, I've got good news and bad news for you, Mark. And I said, well, the last time I was here, you gave me the bad news, and I'm still here. So let's start with the good news. So, and so what, his name was Mark, so as well. So what Mark said is, we can't find any of the cancer. And I thought, okay, so what's the bad news then? What have you found instead? And he said, no, nothing like that. We just have no idea why. I said, well, with the greatest of respect, it's not bad news for me. He went, no, I understand. And he said, but I like to know. And I said, well, why do you think? And at that point, he doesn't want to say, because he doesn't want to get in any kind of trouble or have me sue him or anything like that. But I managed to drag out of him that they thought, actually, what happened is, this was in April 2021. So it's about 9 weeks after the yacht. Well, it's a bit more than that. So January, February, March, April. Yeah, 9-10 weeks after the yacht. So what they thought was, there were about a dozen reported cases in medical journals around the world. People like me that had a late stage diagnosis of cancer, 6 months to live, and they weren't going to be around. I had no chemo, no drugs, no nothing. And now for some reason, they can't find the cancer. It's gone. And the only common thing was, all of those patients had COVID. So what they thought was COVID killed the cancer. And as soon as he said, we think it's got something to do with COVID, I was straight on it. Get it out as a vaccine. Because if it's cured me, it will cure everyone else. He went, no, it doesn't work like that. Well, turns out what they think it did was drive my immune system into overdrive. And when it drove my immune system into overdrive, and I'm in pretty good shape. I'm pretty fit. I spend a lot of time in the gym. I take all these vitamins and minerals to supplement and support myself. But they think all of that stuff dealt with the cancer, the immune system is really good at dealing with many illnesses. But what it's bad at is it doesn't say, oh, I'll deal with a cold and I'll leave the flu and maybe with something with this COVID thing. It just blitzes. And it turns out that they think that my immune system was in good enough shape to blitz it, and it dealt with the secondary cancers. And I've been clear for 5 years now. So I'm out of, although you're always in remission, I'm not in remission on the lists of anybody anymore. We came out that in January. So I kind of feel that I'm lucky to be here. I was given a second chance, but the second chance I was given came with you better do something with it. And that's when I started thinking about the book, because of the promise I made in the recovery to my son, thinking that would be it. And then when I was on stage talking about it, and I'd spoken about my story and what we were doing, somebody came to me afterwards and said, I want to help you. I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine. And of course, what do you say? You say, thank you. I appreciate that. But you have no idea what it means, because lots of people would say they want to help you. Anyway, the following week, we got on a Zoom call with a family office. And we spent an hour just chatting about the book, what we were trying to do, but they immediately zeroed in on my health journey, what I'd been through. But it was really apparent very quickly to me that they just knew too much. The kind of too much that says you know somebody that's going through what I've been through, or you're going through it because you don't ask those questions in the way that you're asking them without a lot of knowledge. So I spoke to them about that, and we spent an hour talking about that. I've never been out to raise any money. I'm just a guy like anyone else that goes to work, that started to look at something because I made a promise to my son. But by the end of the call, we'd not spoken about what we were trying to do much. We'd spoken for the whole hour about their situation. I said, look, I know that you're on the clock, but I'm here to chat with you about this at any time you like. Because what you're going through isn't particularly pleasant. And if I can help in any way from my experience, which is all I can do is share my experience, I will. And they went, thank you. And we went to close the call, and I hadn't even thought about talking about, I didn't even know why we were there. So, and we're going to help. I said, well, what do you mean help? They said, we want to help you move this forward. And I said, but you don't even know what it is. And they said, we do. And we're in. And I said, well, what? Just to clarify, you don't, when a gift horse looks you in the mouth, you don't push it away. So what does that mean? Because I've not raised money. They said, the value that we have for a family office is they walk by an awful lot of companies, big and small, because they're not prepared, because their profits are poor, because they're not quite at the right threshold that they need to be at to make it interesting from a family office. What they saw us doing was aggregating it together. And they wanted to support it because it meant they could come back to other businesses. But they wanted to support me because of how I got there. And so people stood up on stage.
So these were your initial investors then?
Yeah. Yes. So they said, we're going to bring someone else to this. And so they did. So that's 2 family offices with 22 billion. Now, the downside of a family office is they're slow to deploy. Not because they don't want to emotionally. The problem with a family office is everybody wants to hit them up and they want something from them. And they get that all day, every day. I didn't ask for anything. I spent all my time talking about how can I help you get through what you're going through without you telling me that you're going through it. And that turns out to be refreshing. I didn't know because I'd never been to raise any money. So what it says is, if you've got the right intent with the right luck, because it was luck, and by getting something started and not procrastinating, you can achieve things that you never thought would be, anybody in the world would say would be impossible to achieve, because that's what that was. And those people that laughed at me a few months before and said, you'd never raise any money, because I stood on stage and said, I'm going to need to raise money, which is why they came to me to say, we want to help. But I hadn't connected it. One meeting, 22 billion, and they've been absolutely amazing. And in Q4 last year, we did another round of support. This comes from alternative lending. So it's not bank money, it's debt funding. That's been really interesting because that's we've announced 350 million, but it's 500 million. which allows us to build these bigger groups at speed. But the family office, it goes a bit too slow. But actually what the family office want is to buy them when they're ready, so we can use the alternative credit to group them. If it's the right profile for the family offices, they'll take them. But if it's not, we've got access to the whole corporate market. And so what we're thinking about is the problem we're trying to solve is not Mark being blessed. And I am absolutely blessed and unbelievably lucky and privileged to be in a position where somebody would want to support something I'm doing. Couldn't believe it. But actually, the problem we're solving is not Mark. The problem we're solving is too many business owners in every single country around the world put their life into building something. They do run it as a lifestyle business, but more than half of them don't prep, and they get into a position where they're in, the ones, because when they're in their business in their 70s and 80s, it's either because they love it, which is one reason, or because secretly, listeners all gather around, when you tell your other half that you're going to sell the business and you're going to be at home more frequently, they're like, oh, no, you're not. Get back out there. Don't you dare. So there's that factor which does happen. Or sadly, the most popular not popular, but the most disappointing reason is the preparation and planning that they suddenly realize they need to do hits them when they're selling. And so a broker says you're worth this, and they say, no, we're worth this, because they've worked out what they're going to lose in the leakage, and they need to get a net in their bank of X, which means they've got to sell for Y. And that's why a lot of them don't get sold. So we've solved that problem. It's a global bloody issue. We can't help people in sanctioned jurisdictions, obviously, but we can help in a lot of other places. And the results that we're going to get will vary in terms on the keep it side as to their personal condition. I can get most people out of a business tax-free, but it requires them to do some of the things that I would suggest, having looked at their particular situation, and that might not be acceptable to them, so that's okay. So it might be tax-free, it'll be tax minimized, but it's still saving them a fortune and putting more money in their bank to enjoy. And then once that's done, there are two other really key things that we can help with that we don't talk about because it's confusing, but I'll mention them. Is imagine that you're a business worth 5 million, and we can help you in less than 6 months make it valued at 10 million and then get it sold in the following 12 months, so that you don't end up with 3, but you get 8 or 9. Now, think forward from there. What a lot of entrepreneurs do, and I encourage them to do, is take that time out and go and do the holiday, do the world cruises that you were going to do. Spend all the time with the children and the grandchildren all playing golf. You are going to get bored. And when you get bored between 6 months and 18 months, what a lot of owners do is take some of that resource that they spent their life building and put it back into a brand new venture, which isn't proven, is sometimes really risky.
Yeah, I've noticed this as well. But now, so this means that in the period that you're transforming the companies and making them more profitable.
Hold that thought. I love that thought. I'm not transforming. There's two things that you said. Forgive me for being rude. Let me go back and finish one thought and remember the word transforming, because I'm going to forget, but I want you to remember it for me so I can tell you what it really means. From my point of view, just me, right? So when they've got that money, and you said yourself, you see them going back and putting it into risky ventures, stop, come back and work with us, or go and work with other companies that just they're going through what you just did, and take 3 or 4 of them on as consultants at maybe 5,000 a month. That's 20 grand. And a piece of the equity when they sell, because that's no risk. You've got all the experience. You just did it and they don't know how. And you're protecting your capital and adding it to your capital and growing it, so that through that repeated strategy over the next 3 or 4 years, you could double again. And then if you take that cash and you put it into risk-free investments like insurance products and things like that with somebody like Allianz, then you'll compound and double over a 7-year period. Now you've got a legacy income for life, which got very little risk on it. Not many people think about that. Now, I promised you I'd come back, and I wanted you to remind me of one word, which was?
Transformation.
Right. Now, transformation. Most people will say, organize the business, get systems, processes, procedures, and everything else in play, and the management teams and everything else. While there is a very strong school of thought for that, it may surprise you to hear from me that 70% or more of owners that I speak with don't want that done. Now, when I say don't want that done, what does that mean, Mark? Because people are going to be screaming out of their microphones listening to this podcast and going, that's rubbish, it can't be true. And to a degree it is. Here's what it means. I always work with the business to make sure that the books are properly presented. What do I mean by that? I mean that every now and again somebody might put a business trip for the family through without thinking that that 25,000 euro, actually, that's a really great business trip. I want one of those for myself. But whatever it is having a 3, 4, 5x impact on the value of the business because it shouldn't really have gone through. And when you're running it as a lifestyle for many years, that's cool. But when you're running the business to be sold, you don't do that. So that kind of cleaning up and making sure that the books are in order is important to do for a buyer. They want to see that. Now, it's not so important from a systems and process point of view because let's face it, if you're a business which is grossly inefficient, but you're making 15% EBITDA, a buyer's going to look at that and go, this is how inefficient they are. Oh my God, what a mess. But they're still making 15%. With what we're going to do, we can get that to 20%, 24% very quickly, which gets their investment back so much faster than a business which has already been done. Now, but from the management point of view, from the morale point of view, from the other soft skills point of view, those are things you do want to work on. Now, what we do is we don't play inside the business. Deliberately, we make sure the books are clean. We don't transform inside that business. And I actively promote not doing that. That puts me at odds with most of the world. But I don't do that for a couple of reasons. One, most buyers don't want it because they're going to do it twice. And they're very sensitive in the corporate world to not disturbing the culture too much. And if you've done it once and you've pissed off some of your employees and they left and you do it again, you're going to lose a bunch more. And every business is about the people. So they are happy for that not to be done, but they need clean books and it's got to make some kind of sense. The other reason I don't is when I'm grouping companies, I'm dealing with a different set of management teams. Some of them want to stay. Some of them want to go. So then I can look at it and say, what skills can we transfer for a combined leadership of the group, which adds more value to the potential acquirer? So I don't play from that point of view because if I do and then I get another one, it slows me down. It extends the timeline, and more than 70% of the buying community that we work with don't want it done. 30% do. So it's not a one size fits all, but it allows us to move at speed. So when I talk about transformation, I'm talking about value transformation because I can double the value from the outside in a way that other people can't. Now, you may say to me, well, other people, they could do this themselves, and they can, but they don't know how. And if they start going around the industry to all of the companies they might see that add value, they'll do it from a competitive point of view, not a complementary point of view. And they'll take their eye off the ball. And that's not what they should be doing or that they do. That's what, and any more than we would go in and run their business. They've got no expertise in doing that 99% of the time, any more than you or I going into their business and running it from day one without their help would be a wise decision. Are you with me?
Sure. So how do you source these companies? A client comes to you, how do you source the synergistic or, companies that you can combine together, even if they're not synergistic, but let's call it something between synergistic and a roll-up strategy that you want to present to a client?
Yeah.
You find them?
There's a number of tools and processes that we use that we've developed within the business. And so, but it will come from two different directions. Either we will be talking to an acquirer. Let's go back to the 6.5 billion acquirer. They will know that we're working with companies of a particular value range because we'll tell them. And that fosters a discussion on what they want. So we know what their mandate is. And that allows us through the systems process. So we spent a lot of money on tools and databases and access to information about companies all over the world and where they are, which owners are not going to do, that allows us access to them.
Right.
And so we'll approach. And we know that we've got a buyer who's not paying us anything. For them, it's great. It's free. But we also know that we've got to find the right profiles of business. If we don't think we can do that, we won't engage. Now, the other way it comes is that a seller will come to us and say, so here's a interesting one. This will surprise you. This is the United States. So we have a couple of accounting firms that would like to be sold. They're not that big. They do about 1 million a year in retained earnings. In other words, managed service, repeatable revenue from their clients. Good broad distribution of clients, not concentration at all, anything like that. Struggling to sell. So within my group, we've got 25 people in the company. And so what we are able to do is take that and say, okay, these are accounting firms, and along with that goes tax and advisory, along with that goes some other services. Who's interested in that? And so through the same tools, we can outreach to find out the interested parties and approach, because we've got it from the other side. Now, with an accounting firm doing 500,000 to 1 million, we've probably got to get 15 or 20 of those, because we're basically arbitraging EBITDA to get to a much higher value point, which is what you do in your preferred method. You like to call this a roll-up. The reason I don't call it a roll-up, let's call it Mark's virtual roll-up.
Okay.
Because I'm using the capital to control the build of the group with a buyer in mind already, where I know what their criteria is, and I know that they're acquisitive, and I know they're going to transact and buy. I can even arrange financing for them if they don't have it available. Most of the time at that level they do. And when I say arrange, I can introduce them to people that would fund them. So we can do that. And so that's all the way from 6.5 billion a year to buy bigger companies. They want them at 100 million in revenue, down to accounting practices that make sense to group. And the acquirer for that is actually thinking, the thing about the accounting market is it's highly fragmented all over the world. And one of the challenges in the accounting space when you're submitting company returns is what they're thinking about is, and they don't do this deliberately, but they're looking to make sure that the right numbers are in the right boxes to make the customer's life easy, but also their lives easy. So that's more of a compliance related thing. And what I see in those professions that rely on information and experience is, in some cases, they've rested on their laurels a little bit. And somebody comes to them like, you're right, it's not an expert. They'll go A, B, C, X, Y, Z, but they're not up to speed with all the latest changes. But AI is. And so we've challenged accountants to some of the advice they're bringing, which allows us to then say, well, if you did this, this, and this, and initially they might go, no, you can't do that. But when they actually check into it and take their own advice on it, they go, you've got a point, which is code for you're right. And we're not always right, but you've got to have the conversation to make, to get it started. And that's to the benefit of the clients. But we can group those together. And these acquirers are looking to buy those kind of practices that are information heavy, tax advisory, accounting, and so on and so forth, because they know that they can add an awful lot more value to those companies and drive more share of wallet with those clients. And they're looking at AI as to ways in which they can do that, which is not something that the traditional owners, who have a lot of them have been at these businesses for a long time, can do. So there's a transitional shift in value creation in terms of the services that can be provided. And therein, but what that shows me is I never assume with a customer that wants to buy that I have any inkling as to what it is they're buying and why. I get them to tell me, because I've just shared with you a few examples that are complete chalk and cheese. Does that translate on your show? What did we say about chalk and cheese?
It's chalk and cheese. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's completely.
Yeah,
We
understood.
want to get it, but on the
Right,
seller
right.
side of it,
But they're essentially, specifically in the accounting example, they're essentially buying the customer base.
yeah,
Because there's such a huge transformation in the entire industry that whatever they do in a fragmented way won't matter for the buyer in the end.
no, yeah, yeah, absolutely. They're buying the customer base. They're buying the revenue stream of that customer
Yeah.
base is what they're buying, and it's highly fragmented. And the traditional service that's been offered is just the bog standard bookkeeping, accounting. All of the other value-added pieces that can go around it often are not provided at all. But that's such a massive opportunity, because business owners trust the lawyers and their accountants. Now, and so there's a huge play for that, and it's happening all over the bloody world. So, and we can just add a small amount of value. Remember, what we're trying to do is help business owners grow value quickly and exit with more in their bank. We're not really in that whole big picture, but we've got a unique way of approaching it that no one else is able to use. or no one else is able to deploy right now because we've got access to the cash to support us, which was so lucky,
So
unbelievably
let me ask
lucky.
you a question on that. So the 22 billion that you got mandated with, is this for particular industries? And then for the accounting example, you actually find additional buyers, or is this does it fall within the mandate from the original client, the investor that you had?
I can use that cash
Mm-hmm.
across any industry.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
What I have to make sure of is how do I protect the cash of the investors and make them money?
Mm-hmm.
So in some industries, so if you give them what if you take a look at what we're doing, and where if you go back to that roll up example that we discussed right at the top of the show, and we were looking at a 7, 8, 9 year period or a 10-year period to acquire, build, streamline, position, market, and sell, and get out and return to investors. We're condensing it into a year and a half, or somewhere between 6 months and a year and a half, which means that we're going straight to source to sell it. We're not preparing it, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so in that scenario, providing that the capital is secured, and that is a bit of secret sauce that I probably shouldn't share because that's value that we bring, then we can move very, very quickly. Without the capital, you can't. You can still do it, but you're back into, oh, I've got to raise the money and pay it off in 5 years. And what we've done is completely disrupt the way in which companies are bought and sold and valued and exchanged all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
So that owners keep more. It doesn't cost investors any more. They don't pay any more money. It's
Yeah.
just a lot of the fees that would have gone out, less of it's going out, and we're forcing value in. And we have to force value in because we get paid on the value that we create. We get paid on the value that we force in, and we do create some value by fees that are saved. So we get some of that too. But the owners end up with an awful lot more, and they look at it and go, well, we're not paying you unless you deliver extra. They are paying a monthly fee. They have to decide on that. But then we're not giving you anything unless we're giving you extra. So what's to lose? It's upside.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they sometimes. I had a conversation with a large oil and gas business yesterday. We've got a buyer for them. They're a 50 million business easily. And the conversation, but in their case, I'm not going to group anything around it. So I can't force value in it. They already do 12.5 million in profit. And so I think they're worth more than 50. They think they're worth about 50. I take their valuation most of the time, but it's lower than my valuation, which is unusual. It's normally the other way around. But in their particular case, they'll say, well, you're just going to introduce us to a buyer. We'll give you 1%. And I'm going, no, it's not business that we want to take, because we're not forcing value in, and they don't need us. They don't fall into the 9 out of 10 that need us. But if we did engage, there is a massive value in the buyers that we bring, because we've already got the buyers and we know that they can transact, and we've spent some time figuring that out. We're going to save them a year and a half, because A, they don't know where the buyer is. B, they've got no connections to the buyer. C, I've got an army of nicely aggressive people that chat a lot, that don't mind picking up the phone and talking to people, whereas most business owners that have been in a business for a long time are above that and don't have anybody that can do that. So they're going to go out. They can't go to a broker, because the broker never makes a market like that. That's what we make markets. And their banker is going to have a Rolodex of people limited to the area that they're in, not go across different countries and everything else. So I've said, look, these are the reasons why, if we were to get together, we'd add an awful lot of value that you're not easily going to get anywhere else. But that's a decision for you to make. And we're application only. There's only a certain number of companies we can work with, and there's a lot of people that we're blessed to say would like to work with us. So I'm trying to get more and more people aware of what we do, so that we're not needed in the marketplace. We don't add any value because everybody can do it and does do it. I don't somehow think I'm ever going to achieve that, but I'll strive for that objective, for the over the next 20 or 30 years. So here we go.
So how does one apply? What's the process?
Oh, it just starts with a conversation. It's so on the website, we've built some easy tools, so you could do a quick valuation on the business. And I'm just about to what we have started doing, and I think it's confusing people, is, can we double the value of your business? What does it look like? So all you got to do is answer 3 questions, and it will show it to you on the screen. And then can we help you keep more of it? So we don't even have to ask you any more questions. We can work out what we think we can keep you at a high level. You need to do a detailed view on that to be certain, but we can have a look at that. But this keep it and compound it piece, which is, okay, now you've got all this, what are you going to do, is way too early for most people when they're even thinking about potentially selling. And so, we're going to leave those pieces off and turn them off for now and just focus in on it. Okay, we can double for you. This is what it's going to look like. How much of it do you want to keep? Do you want to keep all of it? 90% of it, or do you want to give away, up to 50% of it in taxes and fees? And we'll turn that piece on. And they can do all that for free on the website, and it will store it for them. They can just put the name and email in there, and it'll hold it there. They can come back and amend it whenever they want to. Don't have to talk to me about that. But if they want to find out a little bit more about how that would work, then somebody will WhatsApp and say, "Hey, you send you this report. Do you want to have a chat about what it means?" And we'll happily hop on a call. Now, if they're doing less than 500,000 in profit, it will take them down a different path, which says, here's a copy of my book, go grab it. If you want to build out a marketing plan that helps you with your website wireframing, email nurturing sequences, LinkedIn campaigns, and 12 other assets, and we haven't even gotten to Facebook and Instagram, things you can do there yet, then go here, answer 12 questions, and it will start building this stuff out for you. And these are templates that you can use and adapt. A lot of companies we do talk to are not good at marketing. So I want to help them get from where they are to where they need to be. All these resources are free, and so they can do all of that. And yeah, it's easy. They don't have to talk to an English guy. They can go and self-help. But for those that want to go to that next level, then we'll hop on a call, and then they can apply to join the wait list. And then as I either grow the business, we've got 25 people in the company now, and we're hoping to grow organically. We bootstrap everything. We've not taken outside investment for our own growth. The investment that we've got is for client exits. That's the thesis for it.
Yeah.
Then as we build more people in the business or partnerships, we've started to work within people individually as affiliates in the insurance sector and the fractional CFO sector and stuff like that, because it adds value to what they're doing. Fractional CFOs now, we're one of the companies we're talking to in the UK does 600,000 a year in profit, but it does 12 million in rev, and they're in the lighting space. So it's a difficult one to sell, but the owners would like to sell because they're of a certain age. But they've got a fractional CFO in there. So I'm saying to the fractional CFO, we need to work to get the books in the right way so that I can position it to the right buyers. And they're going to want somebody in play that knows that business. Would you be willing to step up to us interim CEO role if asked? In that case, they're like, yes, because it's really good for their career as well, right? So we're starting to see a lot of that, and none of it's been planned, my friend. It's all been just trying to solve one problem, serve one mission, and doing it, and just trying to do the best that we can with the limited resources that we've got. So if that helps people, that's fantastic, and that's all that we want. And if it doesn't help people, then that's great, because when we engage, obviously we're a business, and we engage, and we're there to be profitable so we can help other people, that's for sure. But most of it is getting people with book number 1 and book number 2 is coming, which is, that book number 2 will be more around the framework, because this is a framework that anybody can adopt. It doesn't need you, it doesn't need me. They just need to follow through the framework and pick the bit that's relevant to where they are right now. I think I mentioned that the youngest, I've got 2 people in working with us. One of them's 19. He was not drug addict, but almost going to jail at the age of 15 because he was driving his parents mad and doing drugs all the time. That young man is now taking that story, writing a book to help other parents deal with kids of a certain age that start to think that vaping and then drugs and marijuana and stuff like that is cool. So because there's not much help for us parents out there. So he's writing it from that perspective to help them. It's not going to be a huge bestseller, but it's already launched him into the digital world, and he's now making 25,000 a month, living out in Bali and doing it's complete turnaround. And then the other young man is much more on the M&A side of it. He just wants to have enough cash by the time he's 30 to pay for the house and pay for the kids' education. And he hasn't even got a girlfriend. Talk about future planning. So I know that we can have an impact and influence and disrupt the way people thinking about building long-term wealth all over the world. So it's very humble. It's just getting started, and it's making a difference. I'd like it to make a bigger difference where it can.
Mm. Mark, thank you so much. Anything else that you'd like to add? I mean, you added so much, how should I say, words of emotional support, business model, innovation, words of encouragement, so much. I don't even know where to just share whatever you feel like.
I don't know what to say. I'm sure your listeners have had enough listening to me. In fact, by now, I'm sure they've all switched off. But no, I would just like to say, look, if we can help anybody, reach out. We'll do what we can to help. And I'd like to thank you for having me on. It's a privilege to spend a bit of time getting to know you and chat today and learn your own journey with your own son. Yeah, it's been an honor for me. Thank you so much for having me.
It was an honor having you on. It was a true pleasure. And also a question, how long is your waiting list? So as not to discourage anyone, are the applications checked regularly?
Yeah. Waiting list applications are anywhere between 3 and 6 months.
Mhm. Okay.
In terms of if we're full. So if there's sometimes there's a really, we were working with a client recently where that particular owner didn't have long to live. We'll make space for that. But for most businesses, a 3 to 6 month waiting list isn't huge.
Yeah.
We can, and sometimes when we're talking to a business, we know they're not going to be ready for 12 months. We know they will not be ready. So we can put them on a waiting list and come back and talk to them at that point. But where it's the right thing to do, create a space, we will. But we're very much on the quality execution side of it. And with 25 people, you've got a capacity for, you're handling 40. My guys don't handle more than 10 each. Because you've got to, there's quite a high touch point on the customers that we've
Yeah, I
got.
mean, that's
So normally between 3 and 6 months before a space opens up.
Yeah, I do high touch of 5 max. I can't do more than that. The rest is just, if, how should I say, a chance situation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.